Alright, so we're doing the reloading base, and here's my prototype, which you saw me using earlier. Now this was made from a pine stud, which was cut out on the table saw. It was ripped lengthwise so that I had two sections that were 3/4 and 3/4, but they were actually closer to 5/8 and 5/8. Because of the blade going through the stud, it took out some material. Well, this piece was 5/8 thick. Now, what I originally imagined was to remove material about 1/4 of an inch down and leave material that would allow for a puzzle piece fit for the reloads. So on my router, I took off all the extra material that I didn't need, except for what was going to be holding in the reload. Alright, and like I said, I have one to one side because my foot might be here and I would be doing a bow drill, or I could have it clamp down on both sides, which is why all these spaces are here. Have one in the middle. I could do hand drill, pump drill, mouth drill, and I just happen to have one on the other side to kind of balance everything out. Well, to make something that's actually a little easier than having to remove all this material, for example, you may not have a router, you may not have a table saw, first of all, to even remove a little bit of material. So what would be an easier way to do this, and actually a better looking way than my prototype here? Well, what I did was I went to the hardware store and I got some oak trim. So this oak trim is 3 3¼ inches in width. Okay, and I cut, because these things come in really long sections of like 6, 8, 10 feet. I cut this into 12-foot sections, this oak flooring. Now I picked flooring that had the most flat surface I could possibly find, because some of the trim has a lot of, hills and valleys, and to make it look good. So the whole oak flooring here is 1/2 inch thick. So what I did was, on my table saw at least, for me 1/2 inch is a little tall. So I took it down to about 3/8 of an inch on the table saw, and on my belt sander here, I rounded off all the sharp edges, as you could see. So I have no more sharp edges. And I tried to leave as much surface area on top as I possibly could. And I sanded everything down. Not just on the belt sander, but I took some finer 100 grit, and I went around all the edges and anything that looked a little rough. Took off any kind of splinters. Okay. So you can see the difference between the original flooring and the one I kind of worked down a little bit. So this is 1/2 inch, this one's 3/8 of an inch in thickness. And if you have a planer which takes material off top, that would be really great. I don't happen to have one, at least right now, but I will. And then my job will be a lot easier. But I like the challenge. The challenge is probably the best part of getting it done. It's a puzzle. Have to figure out these problems and solve these problems. So the next thing we're going to do is you need to have these pieces here that are going to fit on top to hold in the puzzle pieces. Alright? And what we're going to use for those, at least in my case here, are some leftover pieces of walnut. Now these, again, the walnut comes from firewood. I used to have a huge black walnut tree in my front yard, and we took it down because it was in the wires, my neighbor's wires. So I have a lot of walnut. So this is the heartwood, which is brown, and I cut this into some 1/4-inch sections. This one's about a little under a foot long, but it's a 1/4 inch in thickness. Now what I'm going to do is cut out 4 1-inch square pieces and 2 2x1-inch pieces, which I'll show you with some pictures. And then from each I'm going to cut out a 1/2-inch section. Okay, so in a way they look like this. This is a 1x1 with a 1/2-inch cutout. This is a 2x1 with a 1/2-inch cutout there and a 1/2-inch cutout there. Alright. So what I'm going to do, at least in this case, is cut out 4 of the 1-inch and 2 of the 2x1-inch and put that together. Okay? Alright, so I'm going to do that and we'll be right back. Alright, so here's what I've done with the board. I measured in, just like the prototype, I measured in 2 inches from the side, okay, and I marked it off with a pencil, and I did that on both sides. Now this space here is for me to clamp down to the table, and as you can see here, I marked out this 1/2 inch, that 1/2 inch that goes in, and about a 1/2 inch wide. These spaces are for me to be able to pin this board to the ground if I need to. So if I'm outside and I want to pin the board, well, I just put a stake there and put a stake there, and that's what these spaces are for. So I'm going to cut those out. And so I have 2 inches on each side. But what I've done here too is I've drawn a line down the center of the board, of the reloading base. Now this width is 3 1/4. So what we have here on each side is 1 1/2 plus 1/8. Okay, 1 1/2 plus 1/8 on each side. So that's, and then you have the line down the middle. Okay. Now that's really just a guiding point for now. So I've taken my 1/4 inch thick walnut pieces. I told you I was going to cut out 4 1-inch by 1-inch, which I did, and 2 2x1-inch, and I was going to take out 1/2 inch. So I took a 1/2 inch square out of each one of the 4, and on each side of the 2x1. Okay, and that looks like these here. Okay, now if you want, you can make 2 more of the 2x1s, and so you can have 1, 2, 3. But I'm only going to do 1, 2, one in the middle and one on one side. So you're welcome to make more. And I cleaned up the edges with some sandpaper. Okay, that's some 100, but you can get finer than that if you really want to. And so the next thing we're going to do is I'm going to cut these holes for the these slots for the for pegging the board to the ground, and I'm going to show you with our reloads, okay, where to place the walnut pieces or whatever wood that you chose to get. And the first thing we're going to do is glue that down, and then we're going to screw them into the board. So first we need to place them. Alright, so we'll be right back with that after I do these these slots. Alright, so we're back. I cut my slots here on each side so I could pin this to the ground if ever I'm doing this outside. Now, the next thing I'm going to do is we need to anchor down these pieces so that they can get screwed in, okay? Because we're going to screw them in to really secure them. But first we need to make sure that they're in place the way they're supposed to be and not move, okay? So, now how this board is because it's flooring on this one side, it still has a bit of a slope, okay? So, but how this works out for me in this instance is if I have a reload here, if I put my walnut piece all the way up against this edge here, so it's lined up, it's lined up flush with this side, okay, and I put a reload there, and I put it on the 2-inch line, and I take another walnut piece, and I put it carefully so it fits like a puzzle on the 2-inch line here, up against the reload. Well, it just makes it to the tip of the slope right there, which is pretty good. So here's what I'm going to do. I'm going to take the 2x1 and put that on the other side here, so I now have 3 sides covered. Okay. And I'm going to take the other T, the other 2x1, and I'm going to put that there. So now I have all 4 corners covered. Now what I'm going to do here is I'm going to take a little bit of super glue. Now you could use epoxy if you want and wait for it to completely finish drying. I guess I need a new one. Open up a new set here. So carefully, one at a time, I'm going to take a corner and I'm going to glue it down. Careful not to get any on your fingers. You don't want to glue yourself to the board. And I'm going to let that one sit there. Now I have a placement marker for where all the other pieces are going to need to go. Okay, this is our starting one. So we're going to let that sit for a second. Let that really attach. And then we're going to do the, and then you know what? I'm just going to go ahead and do the other pieces, glue them in. And then what I'm going to do is show you how to screw these in. Okay, very carefully. Alright, so I'm going to do all of these all at once now. And then we're going to come back and screw them in. Okay? Drill them and then screw them. Alright, I'll be back. Okay, so I just got done drilling the holes after the glue has set. Okay. Now, I started this one off here where I did the screws already. Now, the drill bits, I have one here that's 1/16 of an inch, and I have one here that's 1/8 of an inch. And I realized that the screws that I have, they're number 6s, they're 1/2 inch in length. They're flathead Phillips, these ones. So they look like this. Okay. They're 1/2 inch tall. But the thing is that they are about 1/8 of an inch in width, where the screw is. So that would be too loose. So I need something that at least I need something that was between 1/16 and 1/8. Now I did find a drill bit that's like that. I have no idea what size it is, but it seems to be a really good fit. So I popped in 3 screws already. Now when you're doing this, you have to be very careful. I was not very careful, and you can see here that it started to crack along the grain, because as you know, grain runs from side to side. So that means that these pieces, these L's that you make, that means that somewhere along the way the grain is going to run out somewhere. Okay, so here on this one the grain is running across this way, So there's a slight crack in that one right there. But I can glue that back. I just have to be very careful with the screws. Now the next thing I'm going to do is these need to be kind of countersunk. So what I have here is a like a file bit that's pointed. And what I'm going to do is I'm going to countersink some space for the screw to kind of go down into. Alright, so I'm going to do that on all of these, and then I'm going to come back. I did that on these three already before I screwed those in. Alright, so I'm going to do that and show you that, and then we're going to screw them in. Alright, so I've countersunk a space with this filing bit here. Okay. You can see the spaces that were made for the screws to go into. Now you may get screws that you may not need to do that with. Okay, but I like a good challenge. I like having to balance stuff out, figure stuff out. So I did that. Now we're going to screw these in. First thing I'm going to do is actually clamp the board down a little bit. We have a Phillips head screwdriver, and you're going to find out right away whether or not your hole that you made is too small, because it's going to crack along the grain just when you're screwing it in. Not even when you're getting it down and pushing down. You're going to know as soon as you start screwing it in whether or not it was a good fit or not. Okay, now I'm not going to go too far because I don't want to crack the grain. But I have 1/2 inch screws, so I know that I'm definitely going through the 1/4 inch walnut pieces and down into the oak flooring. Now these are going to keep these secure for when I'm stepping on the board. I just have to be careful that when I'm actually stepping on the board, that I'm not going to break any of these pieces. Now the way around that is to not make these pieces out of wood. The way around that would be to make it out of something plastic or something metal or some other kind of material, okay, instead of wood. But I like to use wood, so I've chosen wood. But you don't have to. But then that would get rid of the problem of it having to crack if you're not careful. Okay. All right, so I'm going to finish this off and we'll be back. All right, so here's our finished product. Okay. Now here's our some scrap pieces of that walnut and another one of the sections of the oak flooring. Now I screwed them in, but you can see here that they're a different color. So I've oiled the base with linseed oil, and as you can see, the grain, the relief has really come out of the oak as well as the walnut. Here's it side by side. So this is sanded walnut but unoiled, and this is sanded and oiled. Okay. The oak too, remember, is sanded because I cut off a top layer and sanded it down really smooth. Okay, so there we go. We have our side slots to pin the board for when it's outside, and our pine reload pieces fit in there like a puzzle. There we go. Fit in there really well, right? Nice and snug. And here are our exit areas for the coal to sit, as a shelf so it doesn't go anywhere. Okay. And that is an example of a reloading base. Now again, before I said you could make 2 more of these T's and put them here instead and make it like the prototype that I'd made and move that over and use this space here. But I just wanted one that has a middle and one side only, so that my foot can go here if necessary. So, alright, but you can make it any way you want from this point on. After you make one, you have the idea how to do it, which is really what it's all about, and then you take it from there. Alright, let's finish up with pump drill. Here we go. Alright, so I'm back. Now I mated the Yucca reload to this little 1.5 by 1.5 by 5/8 reloading base. And that fits right in the slot like a piece puzzle. Okay, and it doesn't go anywhere. So it's Cordar spindle. It's got the 2 knots on the sides. Now I have the reload notch facing you. So we're going to get this warmed up. Now I really like this pulley wheel because its action is very smooth. The mass on it is so equally distributed that it doesn't even feel like you're doing anything at all. And pumping is so easy. Even the one-handed. And our notch is filling. Again, if you think the notch is high, you can always fill it with coal extender or some kind of dust. Let's see how we did. Oh, I'm almost there. Hold on. I think I need to go a little faster. The yucca is a very low density, so it burns down very quick. See, my reload is getting really short there. We have a coal, but let it grow, let it glow. Alright, so we're going to take that apart in front of the camera. Just bear with me a sec. want to make sure it's well formed. So I'm taking the clamps off. I'm going to tilt the board. Okay. Now here's the reloading base. That's going to come out. Okay. And there's our coal. Now notice that when I made this, that I have plenty of shelf. There's a shelf that goes all the way around. And if you remember back when we did the shelf fungus for a base, that I made a shelf on it. I think I did that with the mouth drill. Well, with that same concept, I have a shelf already built in here to catch that coal. Okay. As you can see, I could have did that east, west, north, either way. So there's our coal. I'm going to take it off the base. Alright, and reload, and then you just put in a new reload. Just like that. Pop in a new one. 3 slots. 4 notch areas. Okay. Alright. Let's keep going. Now it seems I got most of my supplies from Tractor Supply when it came to pump drill stuff that I was just playing around with. So here I have a wheel tire. You can see the label on it. Wheel tire. And the hole is 1/2 inch. So I took a steel tube that's 1/2 inch thick, steel tube, and I knocked the top to receive the cord. And again, I put a nail through the tube and put a knock in the bottom part of the wheel for it to receive the nail, and it's all epoxied in there. Now for a reload slot, I created a copper tube. The copper tube, as you can see, is hose clamped in to the top, and it's cut and quartered. But as you can see, I don't have a hose clamp where it's quartered. I just have a piece of cedar reload sitting in there. Alright, so I've already mated a reloading base with this. So we're just going to get started. Now this is very heavy. It has a lot of mass, this wheel. I think it's a solid rubber tire. Well, let's give it a go. Anyway, we're using this as a pump drill. Now, because this is so heavy with such mass, I really can't go very fast, but there is a lot of weight on it. So if this was a harder wood of a higher density, this might help. So our notch is filling, but we're not running out of energy. We're pretty good. We'll just keep going. And I think we're almost there. Let's give it a look. Oh yeah. Very nice. So I'll unclamp your base. And here for you, I'm going to remove my reload. And there's our coal. Now you're probably going, Joe, that's so easy, this reloading base. Why didn't you show us that earlier? Well, obviously I'm teaching you how to do this right from start to finish. So I had to show you all those other bases and how to do them and how they're really done somewhat primitively. And now that you've hopefully done many already, you can make something like this, okay? Because making stuff over and over again gets kind of tedious. If you know what you're doing, you've done it a number of times, you've got it down, then you make something like this, okay? Otherwise, your basics, your foundation, you're not going to have one because you won't have made anything, really, of substance. Okay. All right, let's do some more. Alright, so we're back. And our next one is another pulley wheel. Okay, this one's solid though, as you can see. Solid metal. It's got the groove for what would be a clothesline or something like that. The hole on this is 3/4 of an inch. And this is a 3/4 inch wood dowel, which I got at the hardware store. As you can see, I put the knock in the top to receive the cord. It's quartered. It's actually only cut in half. It's not quartered. With a hose clamp, with a reload of cedar. Okay. Now this one is not nailed in, but you see these holes that are on the bottom here? They're hex key screws. So this is hex key screwed in. Okay. So let's put on our pressure bar brace. I've already mated the reloading base. So we're doing cedar on pine. All the reloads here are lumber pine, 2x4 lumber pine. This one, as you can see, has more speed. It's very balanced. Doesn't wobble. It's got good centrifugal force for the back and forth motion. Okay. It moves very well. smoking very good. So we're going to keep going until we're all done. All right, let's have a look. We got another nice coal. Just gonna let it form. Alright, I'll show it to you and we're gonna move on. There's our reloading base. That comes off. It stays there right on its shelf. And there we go. Let's keep going. Alright, the next one I have for you is a little odd, but it still shows that if you keep things in balance, they will work. Now, I tried to fire a disc of clay, like pottery, and to make a flywheel. What happened was I made a makeshift kiln, but the problem was I had to leave for work, so I couldn't keep the kiln going, and so therefore it's very under fired. All right, so I'll show you the pictures of how that kind of got made together. Now it's because it's under fired, it's not very solid. So what I did was I supported the bottom of it with some like paperboard cut out, and put that on top of there. Now I inserted a wood dowel, which is 3/4 of an inch, through that, and I put a bamboo reloading socket on the bottom, which is hose clamped on there, and the reload hose clamped in there is yucca, okay, which is also, it looks like 3/4 of an inch in diameter. So I've already mated a new reload. This thing is very convenient. Now here I have another bamboo pressure bar brace, But you'll notice with this one, I have an adjustable cord. So I have a locking mechanism on the cord. So when I need to lengthen it, I just release it a little bit. And if I need to tighten it, I just do that, tighten down the bolts, and it doesn't interfere, rather than me having to make knots and cut cords on the bottom. And the reason for that is because this one has holes. It doesn't just have the knock slots on the side, which is more convenient, okay? In my opinion. So we get this set up, get it warmed up. Our partially fired clay flywheel sitting on some paperboard. So it's starting to smoke, it's getting warmed up. By the way, that's epoxied to the dowel. And it's not connected to the dowel in any other way, other than glue. So our notch is just beginning to fill. It's not filled with anything else, it's an empty notch. And I think we have a coal already, because it's yucca. Yes, we do. Nice solid one. Oof, that's a good one there. Take out the reloading base. There we go. Alright, next one. Alright, so I have a new one for you. And this one is made out of one of those old cement weights. Okay. As you can see, the hole on this has some bars on each side. Well, I took advantage of that, and with this oak dowel, I took a nail and I put it through the dowel and I bent it downward. See that? And then that nail fits into the bar spaces of that nail and doesn't let the weight leave the spindle, so it's not free spinning. Took advantage of those spaces. Now the top of this spindle, there's a cut groove in it to receive the cord. Okay, so it's not directly on top, it comes in through the side. Makes it a little unique. So how this will go is it'll insert through the side and fit in that way. Now this one's pretty heavy. According to the weight on this, this is 4.4 pounds or 2 kilos, but it's got a lot of mass. So I've already mated our reloading base. by the way, that's another bamboo socket that's attached to the dowel, hose clamped on there, and inside that is another bamboo socket. See that? Hose clamped, and inside that is a reload of yucca. All right, so we got a socket within a socket with a reload. Because that space was probably too big. So we get this warmed up. This is a pretty big dowel. I think it's 1 inch. It is 1 inch, maybe a little over. So it's starting to smoke. Take your time with it. This pump drill really saves you on energy. Just keep going and going. Like it's nothing. Like you just let the bar do all the work. All you have to do is just keep it straight. Oh, we got our coal already. I'm just talking and talking and we got our coal. But then again, it is yuck. So we know that that's easy. Remove our reloading base. There's our coal sitting right there on its shelf, ready to go in a tinder bundle. Alright, next one. Let's go. Alright, so our next one is a grindstone wheel. And it's a 1 inch hole. So this is a 1 inch oak dowel. Okay. And so I drilled a hole inside the 1 inch oak dowel, and I have an insert there. It's not cut and quartered, but there is a hose clamp that has in there a cedar reload. Okay. I have your standard knock on top to receive the cord. I already made it a reload, so this is cedar on pine. As you can see, the mass is off because it's wobbling side to side. So not very efficient at all. But we're going to keep going. So you really don't want to drill where the balance is really off like this. Now it's within the mean to be able to pull it off, but if you're, trying to make a piece of art and you're playing around, I mean, within the realms of science, this is going to work. But, when you're fooling around and you're experimenting and you're trying new things, you want to keep all the principles balanced and do your best. But this one, as an example, is really not something you want to have. So it looks like it's pretty warmed up. Let's try to fill that notch. I'll try and go a little faster, but of course that just throws it off. Alright, let's see what we got. So there's a coal in there. Let's take out the base. Here's our coal. All right. Next one, let's keep going.